Hey everybody, welcome back. In the last video we saw different ways to make objects in JavaScript. In this video we're going to take one of those ways, the constructor function, and we are going to make a bunch of balls, hundreds of balls, load them into an array, and this will be the result. Okay, so now we see the ball constructor function, and we see two parts of the constructor function. We have object variables and object functions. The big choice we have to make, though, is do we want to put the functions inside the ball object itself, or do we want to put it in the prototype? The big difference is if we put the methods in the prototype, those methods only get created once, no matter how many balls we make, and all of the balls share the same functions in the prototype that they're all connected to. So I think what I'll do is I'll start off by putting the methods inside the ball, and then we'll move them outside so we can see both ways. We want to end up, though, with all of the methods for each ball in the prototype, and that will make our code slightly more efficient. So first of all, we want to make sure that the object variables, we have to figure out what does a ball need to know about itself. And so I'm just going to plop some parameters in here. I'm going to say x and y, that's the x and y location of the ball. dx and dy is going to be the difference in speed, the difference in x speed and y speed. So we think of dx as x speed and dy as y speed, the radius and the color. And then all we need to do is put assign those values to local variables. And so under here where it says object variables, I'm just going to put these guys in, and there they go. So this x is equal to x. So whatever I send in here for the x location, that gets loaded. Remember, the equal sign is the assignment operator. The value in x gets loaded into this .x. These are two different variables, each created locally when I create a ball. But the life of x is only going to exist in between this curly brace and this curly brace. So these guys will exist throughout the entire life of the ball object once I've created that ball instance. So I have x, I have y, that's its location, dx, dy, that's the speed. I'm going to have it pass in a value for the radius, so the balls don't have to be the same radius, and each ball can have its own color. Now I could create these values in here. For instance, if I want to set a random value in here for radius, I could do that, but I'm just going to go ahead and send it in, and now that's ready to go. To add a method inside the ball constructor function, all I have to do is place it, make sure it's inside this curly bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is the end of the constructor. And what this is going to do is anything that I put in here is going to show up from inside each of the balls. So let's go ahead and put in a method for render. Okay, so the method for render is just going to be this.run equals function. And then I'm going to have this .check edges, this .update, and this .render. Now this is inside the ball constructor function. That means that each ball will have this method inside of it. And this is just going to simplify my code. When I run this from the other part of the program, all I have to do is call this one function instead of calling each of these three. But now I need to put these three functions in as well. So this render function is going to come in here, and it's going to look like this. So I have this.x is a property, this.run equals a function. And so this is simply going to call three other functions. This.render has this, and this is all the same code that I saw before. Remember, we made the context a global variable, so I can see it inside this function. The alternative would have been to pass the context in here as a parameter, but for now, let's just leave it like this. So we have a stroke style, a fill style. The begin path is going to tell JavaScript that I'm making this arc. I have arc with the proper parameters inside, and then I'm going to say stroke and fill to finish off my shape. Okay, so now I want to put in the update function, and that's going to look like this. The same code that we saw before, x plus equals dx and y plus equals dy, but since it's inside the constructor function, I have to have this so that each particular ball is going to be referring to this. So b1, if it calls this code, b1.x is going to refer to this is b1. If b2 calls this code, b2 is this is b2, and so on. Now see, I have one more function to add. And so let me come down here and see if I can bring this up a bit. So the last function I'm going to add in this particular constructor function is this.check edges. And so now all I should have to do is to create an instance of the ball, and then I'm going to go ahead and call the run function, which will in turn call check edges, update, and render. Okay, so now we want to change this code. This is the code that actually is just creating a single ball. If I look down here, I can see I'm just creating global variables x, y, dx, dy, radius, I've got these values, and then I go ahead and I just draw a single ellipse. That's not what I'm going to want to do, though. If I were to run this actually right now, let's go ahead and take a look. This has just got a single ball moving around the screen, and it's bouncing in and out of my screen, but it's just bouncing off the edges of the canvas. My screen isn't showing the whole canvas, but that's the idea. What we want to do is change this so that I'm going to have this code. I need to change it, so I'm going to have an array of balls, for instance. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say var, and to make an array in JavaScript is much easier than Java. JavaScript arrays are very much more flexible. So this is simply going to be an array, and I just show square brackets, and now that's an array. So this array is 0 length. It can be any length at any time, and I can put different kinds of things, primitives and objects and different kinds of objects and all different kinds of things. So it's even more flexible than a Java array. JavaScript arrays are much easier to work with, at least in terms of setting things up. A little bit harder to debug, which is just the nature of JavaScript. I'm going to get rid of all of these variables. Do I want to do that? Let's see. I'm going to actually need to do this because when I create a... Let's see, I think I'll leave these here for right now. I'll just comment them out. But what I need to do down here is all of this stuff is what has been placed in the other code. So the first thing I need to do is create all of my different balls. So what I think I will do here is I will create a function, and I'll simply say load balls. And so I'll put in a number here to say how many balls I'm going to load. Let's say I'm going to start off with 20. And what I need to do is create that function now. So I'm going to say function, and it's going to be load balls. And I will put in a number here. I'll just call it n. And so the function is going to look like that. And I think I'm going to need most of this stuff. So let's go ahead and put that in here, and we'll uncomment this out. And so every time I come in here, I need all these variables, but then I'm going to go ahead and create a new ball. So to do that, I'm going to say balls. Actually, I need to make a for loop. Sorry. So I'm going to say for, and I'll say var I, and then a semicolon. So this looks very much like Java. And I'm going to say I is less than. Now the array has no length. So what I'm going to do is say I is less than n. Whatever I pass in. If I pass in a 10, I'll go from 0 to 10. And I forgot to set this guy equal to 0. So from 0 to 9 actually. 9 plus 0 is 10. And in any case, so this is going to be I++. And I've got all these variables up here. I need to set these guys up actually inside my loop. And so now, every time I come in this loop, these variables are going to be sent in as parameters. So I can call this guy var, oops, I don't need this one. I'm going to say var x equals and var y equals, var dx equals, and var dy equals, and also var radius. So now I'm just setting up these variables, x, y, dx, dy, and radius. And once I have all those values, now I can go ahead and use those when I create a new ball. So I'm going to say balls, and I'll just say I is equal to, and I'm going to say new ball. And the new ball is going to pass in these parameters. Make sure they match. So I think before we had x, and then we had y, and then we had dx, and we had dy. And of course they could be named anything here. They just have to be, think about the order that they're in. So the first guy, whatever I call this, I could call this A. It doesn't matter what it's being called here. Whatever it gets sent as, it's going to be received as x in the ingoing one. And so now this is going to give me dx, dy, and I think I had radius. And finally, color. I think I'm going to hold off on color for right now. So that's my new ball, and that's going to get loaded in there, and I do all this. So what I should have at this point, if I run the program, is an array filled with whatever number of balls I have, in this case 20 balls. Let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. So if I come over here to the console and I say balls, there it is. I've got a radius, or I've got 20 balls, 0 through 19. So to run these balls, I'm just going to come down to animate, and I've loaded the balls. Actually, I've called animate up here. I need to move this down. So I'm going to load the balls before I call animate. Animate's down here. Now all the balls have been made. And down here I can simply do my for loop again. It's going to be slightly different though, right? Because now my array of balls has a length. So I don't have n anymore, but I can just say balls.length. Alright, so I'm going to put it in here. It's going to be function, animate, and I'm going to put my for loop in here. The big difference is now I've got balls.length. So now I know how long my array is. My array has 20 balls in it, 0 through 19. So I can say balls.length, and then I say balls I go through these, I iterate through them one at a time, and I run them. So if I were to save this now, come back over here and run this guy, I'm going to see that I am running the balls. The balls have no color, so that's a bit of an issue. But other than that, I can see that I have 20 balls, and they are all running. Okay, the last thing I want to do is add color to the ball. And notice that I didn't have my parameters matching. I didn't have this, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't have this 6th parameter, and the program still won. JavaScript really wants to make your code run in Java if your parameters didn't match, if the code couldn't find a constructor function or a function that had the same number of parameters, it simply wouldn't compile. But JavaScript really wants to run your code. So I'm going to go ahead and change this now by adding in some random values for red, green, and blue. Okay, so now I've got a variable. Now I'm not using this because I think I'm only going to be using these right in here to create a string. And so for this color, I'm going to go ahead and put a string in. And so I'm going to put a string in here for CLR. And there it is. So this is RGBA. And I'm putting in the R value, the G value, the B value, and then 0.8. And so now this is my color. And if I come down here to render, this color is going to be that string. So that's how the stroke style and fill style are just going to be set equal to that string and determine the color of each ball. Okay, so finally let's go ahead and run this and see if I have color. And I have color. Balls are a little bit big, but I have 20 balls and they're moving around. Notice that I'm not clearing the rectangle, but we'll go ahead and worry about that later. In any case, at this point I have 20 balls bouncing around the screen, and that's it for today. Bye-bye.